Hey guys, we're back with another unscripted review, and this time we are talking about... I was really excited for this movie. Unfortunately, I was not in the States. I'm not currently in the States, so I don't think anywhere near me put this out into theaters. I know it had a very limited theater run because Netflix is the worst. So unfortunately, I did not get to see this movie in theaters, but the moment it hit Netflix, I of course was going to check it out. I am a massive Guillermo del Toro fan, and I have been for many years. I've seen, I think, every single one of his films, unless I'm forgetting something, and I love almost every single one of them. He's such a unique filmmaker that captures very specific aspects of moral tales and folk tales and fairy tales. He's truly one of the best authors and directors I can think of when it comes to adapting the feeling of a fairy tale, really, like that deeper, more defined story, that gothic richness. And so I was very excited to hear him approaching Frankenstein, a book that I've talked about briefly on this channel a couple times before in my discussions around gothic cinema and gothic literature, of which I've touched on a couple times. You should go check out those videos. I think they're pretty good and seasonal. So how did it actually turn out? Is Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein any good, or has he gotten washed with age and Netflix over his shoulder? Well, the first thing that I want to talk about is the cast. The cast is a mixed bag, but some of it is really fantastic. The surprise standout is Jacob Elordi, and Jacob Elordi is like kind of a weird actor. He got an interesting reputation after Saltburn, another movie that I actually talked about in this series before, and people are like, oh, he's kind of like a joke, kind of. I don't know. In my sphere, Euphoria doesn't get that high of a reputation, and neither does Saltburn. So seeing him come into this and play the creature, I was really, really nervous, and he blew it out of the water. He is hands down the best performance in this movie. He's really, really good. He completely disappears into the role, and you just get such a strong sense of depth from the creature, especially in its different stages of life and discovering humanity. It's genuinely the heart of this movie is Jacob Elordi's performance. It pulls you in, it makes you feel things, sympathy, rage, fear. It's really, really good. On top of that, Oscar Isaac's performance is pretty decent. I'm not sure if he was really the best fit for this role. It may be some of the writing, but Victor comes off in kind of a weird way in this movie. He doesn't feel quite as in-depth. I saw somebody point out that they thought that this was partially because they made Victor so much older, and that goes along with the themes, which we'll talk about later. But I do think it puts Victor in kind of a weird spot as a character, which makes Oscar Isaac's performance a little bit more difficult to fully pull off as believable. But I still really enjoyed it when he was especially getting into all of like the science stuff, the dissection, things like that. I really bought it, and for the most part, his emotional side of things works really well. Christoph Waltz actually surprised me in this. I feel like he's very hit or miss depending on the material, and he was one of the most engaging performances to watch play out, despite not being in that much of the movie. I do think that Mia Goth is a little out of place in this movie, and I'm not sure that's fully her fault. She's not my favorite actor in the world, I will admit, but I think it's more just the character writing around Elizabeth made her feel really kind of awkward and stilted next to some of the other elements. But that actually kind of brings me, along with the other points, towards the characters as my next thing I want to talk about. Because I think that's one of the major criticisms that I and several other people that I've read have about this movie, is that in the way that it goes about telling the story, the biggest thing that suffers is the characters, especially the side characters, but I would argue even the creature and Victor are not nearly as well-rounded as you would expect them to be or as they are in the book. One of the things that's really, really interesting about the book and made it stand the test of time so well is that its characters are interesting and have so much depth and layers to what they're feeling and what they're going through. The creature is a monster at times, but not of his own volition, and has such depth of feeling. In Victor, you really get a sense of his like madness that comes about of trying to create life, why he wants to do it, and the strong sense between Elizabeth and the violence that comes out of that, that's honestly lacking in this adaptation, though the violence isn't lacking, just some of the specific elements of the book. You really feel like you get less of a sense of these characters. I don't know Elizabeth very well in this. I often feel that I don't even know Victor that well in this, despite him narrating half of the movie. So I do think, unfortunately, the characters are one of the weaker parts of the writing of this movie, despite the performances being really, really strong for the most part. Speaking of the narration, though, I wanted to briefly talk about the pacing and structure of the movie because it's very interesting. I like what they did with it. Choosing to go, like in the book, with the kind of ship explanation of the whole story is really interesting. And I like that we get the full, like, narration splitting between the two of them. I think it works. I think it works really well. I happen to really like narration in movies. I know a lot of people don't, but I'm a big Scorsese fan, and he does it really, really well. And I think it's well done here. It's engaging, it doesn't get in the way of the actual storytelling, and keeps the pacing pretty tight. And I like when we switch to the creature's perspective, especially because we get some of that internal monologue from him that you wouldn't get otherwise, especially being that he couldn't really talk for a lot of his segment. So I really liked the structure of this movie and the way they used the narrative framework from the book. I think it's cool, and I like it. And it gives tension. So yeah, props to that. The next major thing that I'll talk about that I think is one of the only other criticisms that I have about the movie, though it's not a total criticism, is the themes. In this adaptation of Frankenstein, the main theme is fatherhood. We get these additional elements about Victor's childhood and father, and Victor is aged up, like I mentioned, specifically to play a father role over the creature and play into these themes about expectations of perfection from a father and that weight of a father-son relationship. And I think it's interesting. I think it works really well in the movie, and I think it leads to some of the more emotionally unique aspects of this adaptation. And I think an adaptation like this should try and stand on its own and do its own thing uniquely with the themes. Not that you couldn't already pull the themes of fatherhood from the original Frankenstein, but this kind of plucks it out as the main thing that it wants to explore. And that's really it's really interesting in the context of giving life to something, playing God in something's life, and what that means through the lens of a father who sees himself as over the child in a literal sense, that he has the right to command every aspect of the child, and how that plays out in the creature who is not exactly a child. It's really interesting, and like Shafrillis pointed out in his review, it makes Victor honestly even more monstrous because they play it directly through this lens of fatherhood. So he's not just this evil creator, more or less. He's this father, and the way he behaves reflects actual fathers at times. So it really adds some depth to him in that aspect. But I do think that this theme limits some of the other themes that are going on in Frankenstein. It feels a bit one note and like sometimes a little on the nose. It doesn't fully work at all times as much as I think what is there is emotional. It's just, I don't know, there are scenes towards the end of the movie and specific lines where like one character is like, "Victor, you're the monster," and stuff like that, that I just felt were a bit much, a bit melodramatic, in a way that I'm not used to saying about Del Toro movies. I love Del Toro's stuff, even Crimson Peak, one of the movies I talked about before, and it's pure gothic storytelling, very overdramatic, very melodramatic, and even that, I wasn't sitting there and like, wow, that's a bit much, isn't it, when they would say something. So I think something went a little bit wrong with their dialed-in focus on the themes on this that made the whole story suffer just a little bit. Not too much. It's not a major problem. I think the fatherhood stuff does work well, but I think it limits it. The production design is really beautiful. I love the way this film looks. Of course, you'd expect that from Del Toro. That's kind of one of his big things, but here is no exception. There's some really fantastic costumes in this. The Death Angel scenes are like really, really cool. I love what they did with that. But I do know some people complained about the kind of digital sheen of this movie and the fact that it's shot from a very pulled back digital lighting kind of look. And I do think that's true. You can kind of see a similar thing echoed in some of his more recent movies, but I also don't mind it that much. I don't think it pulled me out. I don't think it looked ugly. I think it worked for what this is doing. I think the texture of this film really came through well to me, and I don't think I ever sat there thinking, wow, this is ugly. I actually really enjoyed the sense of space and location that we got in a lot of the shots, even the ones that are probably a little bit more pulled back than they need to be. But yeah, I really loved this movie. I think it's probably Del Toro's most violent movie. Like, there's a lot of gore and crazy stuff in this movie, which I really enjoyed. I think it's so much fun. I don't think anybody really does gore quite like Del Toro does. I showed my friends Pan's Labyrinth once, and the scene where they smash the face in with the bottle really took them all off guard, and there's like 10 things like that in this, if not more. And yeah, I think this is just, it's such a neat blend of horror and drama and gothic romance and all of these elements that are in the book done in a really unique way. This is the most into any adaptation of Frankenstein that I've ever gotten. It's very much like my kind of an adaptation though. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I like its philosophical topics on fatherhood and life, even if it's a bit limited. I love its action. I love its violence. I love how threatening they make the creature in this without making him too goofy, despite looking very humanoid, which I really didn't think they'd be able to pull off looking at promotional material for this. I like a lot of the performances. I like the pacing. It's just a cool movie. There are some really all-time scenes in this. I like that Frankenstein is friends with a bunch of rats. I think that's super sick and one of the highlights of the movie. I'm not even joking. And I just think this is a good time. I really enjoyed it. I would definitely suggest you go check it out. I gave it a 4 out of 5, and I can't wait to rewatch it because I'm very curious to see how this movie will age. I just watched this movie. I like to do these reviews fresh off the movie, so you're just getting my unfiltered responses. But over time, opinions do change, and my kind of vibe towards a movie can shift, and I'm very curious to see how this will hold up to multiple rewatches, but I'm really excited to rewatch it. I really hope we get a physical release of this, but it's Netflix, so probably not, because Netflix sucks unless Criterion gets their hands on this. Sometimes that happens, but I don't know, Criterion is like hit or miss on Del Toro movies, so we'll see. But anyway, I hope you guys had an amazing Halloween. I hope you're having a great November so far, enjoying the weather. The weather here is actually surprisingly nice, probably nicer than it was in October, which I wasn't expecting. But continue to enjoy some good movies, if that's spooky movies. I like watching stuff like Nightmare Before Christmas and Black Christmas in November, even like Krampus and stuff like that. I think it's kind of a fun Halloween horror movie transition into more like Christmas themed stuff. I don't like watching those movies in Halloween. So enjoy the season. It's my favorite time of year. I'm super busy here with school. I have like 5 essays due in December, which is a lot for the time that I've had to work on them. So maybe no full scripted essay for November. I have an idea for one, like I had already planned one for November, but that might get pushed back. And if it does, then it might get pushed back even further because I'll probably do a Christmas themed video. But thank you guys so much for your support on the last video. It means so much to me that you guys enjoyed it so much. I got so many new subscribers and comments, and I read all the comments and had a lot of fun engaging with that video. It was a blast to make and do the history and research on, and I'm glad I said some things that people weren't familiar with. I was worried I would just be walking over familiar territory with a lot of people. So if you're new, if you just joined me from that video, it means the world to me that you guys did. And I hope you continue to enjoy what I do with this channel. and go check out some good movies. I love you all, and good night.